Nobody remembered the song that was supposed to begin that night. They remembered the silence. Not the kind that follows music. The kind that falls when thousands of people realize they are watching a man lose a battle he has been hiding for 20 years. Los Angeles, the summer of 1974. The city glowed beneath a dying sunset. Golden light spilled across the sidewalks, while thousands of voices merged into one endless roar. Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. The name rolled through the streets like thunder. Children climbed onto shoulders. Women held bouquets of flowers above their heads. Journalists fought for the best angle. Television cameras blinked with red recording lights. Everyone believed they knew exactly how the evening would unfold. The limousine would stop. The king would smile. He would wave. He would sing. And another perfect night would become another perfect headline. No one, not a single soul, could have imagined that history was waiting in the middle of the street. Inside the black limousine, Elvis sat alone. The cheers outside sounded distant, almost unreal. He loosened the collar of his white jumpsuit and stared at his own reflection in the dark glass. The man looking back at him was smiling, but the eyes belonged to someone much older. Fame had taught him many things: how to smile while exhausted, how to laugh while grieving, how to stand beneath thousands of lights while carrying darkness no one else could see. Charlie Hodge glanced toward him. "You've gone quiet." Elvis answered without looking away from the window. "Do you ever wonder?" He stopped. Charlie waited. "Whether the past ever truly lets go." Charlie smiled softly. "Only if you keep holding on to it." Elvis gave a faint laugh. If only it were that simple. The limousine slowed. Outside, the crowd erupted. Bodyguards stepped into position. Doors opened. A wave of screams crashed through the evening air. Flashes exploded like lightning. Elvis stepped onto the pavement. The world instantly came alive. Hands reached toward him. People cried. Some could barely breathe. To them, he wasn't just a singer. He was proof that impossible dreams could come true. Elvis smiled with the ease of a man who had practiced the expression for years. He shook hands, signed an autograph, bent down to greet a little girl clutching a worn record sleeve. For a few precious seconds, everything felt normal. Then, a child walked into the street. He wasn't running. He wasn't calling for attention. He simply stepped through the crowd as though an invisible path had opened just for him. He looked no older than 10. His sneakers were faded. His jeans had been carefully patched at both knees. His blue shirt hung loosely from his thin shoulders. Several security guards reacted immediately. "Move him back!" But before anyone could touch him, the boy stopped. Exactly 3 steps in front of Elvis. He didn't ask for an autograph. He didn't ask for a photograph. He didn't say a single word. Instead, he slowly raised one hand, closed his eyes, and began to move. The first movement looked almost meaningless. A gentle turn of the wrist, a careful shift of weight. One step backward, then another. People laughed. Someone whistled mockingly. A man near the barricade shouted, "Kid, you're dancing in front of Elvis." The crowd burst into laughter. Another person yelled, "Someone get him out of the road!" The bodyguards moved again. Then Elvis lifted one trembling hand. "No." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Every guard froze. The laughter continued, only Elvis wasn't laughing. His smile disappeared, his breathing slowed, His pupils widened. His fingers began to shake. Charlie noticed immediately. "Elvis?" No answer. The boy continued dancing. Every movement flowed naturally into the next. Left foot, pause. Right shoulder, half turn. 2 slow steps. A circle drawn through the air with one open hand. Then, his fingertips rested gently over his heart. Elvis felt the blood drain from his face. Impossible. No, no. His heartbeat thundered inside his ears, because that wasn't a dance. It was a language. One almost no one on earth had ever spoken. A language created in laughter, practiced beneath broken ceilings, perfected inside an abandoned church hall where no audience had ever applauded. Only 2 young dreamers had known every movement. One of them now stood frozen beneath the Los Angeles sky. The other had vanished from Elvis's life 20 years earlier. The world around him faded. The screaming crowd dissolved into silence. The flashing cameras disappeared. For one impossible heartbeat, he was no longer standing outside a theater. He was back in Memphis. Rain tapped softly against old, stained glass windows. Dust floated through warm afternoon light. A cracked piano waited in one corner. A young man laughed as Elvis stumbled through another awkward step. "You keep listening with your ears," Elvis laughed. "How else am I supposed to dance?" The young man smiled. "Listen with your heart." "I don't understand." "You will." The memory ended as suddenly as it had begun. Elvis nearly lost his balance. Charlie grabbed his arm. "What is happening?" Elvis whispered. "It can't be." The boy reached the final movement. Not fast, not dramatic. Almost gentle. He touched his heart once more, then stretched one hand toward Elvis. Exactly as it had been done 20 years ago. Not one mistake, not one forgotten detail. The street fell silent. Even the people who had laughed moments earlier no longer spoke. None of them understood why, yet all of them felt that something far greater than entertainment had just unfolded before their eyes. Elvis slowly stepped forward. His knees felt weak. His throat tightened. His entire body trembled. He stopped only a few feet away. For several endless seconds, neither of them moved. Then Elvis did something Charlie had never seen before. He copied the first movement. Perfectly. The boy answered with the second. Elvis answered with the third. The child completed the fourth. Back and forth, movement after movement, without music, without words. It looked less like a dance and more like 2 souls remembering a conversation interrupted by time itself. Photographers lowered their cameras. One reporter quietly removed his glasses. "I don't know what this is," he whispered, "but I don't think we're supposed to interrupt it." Tears gathered in Elvis's eyes. He had stood before millions. He had sung before kings and presidents. He had never been afraid of a stage. Yet one little boy had reduced him to silence. Finally, Elvis forced the words out. "Who taught you?" The boy looked straight into his eyes. His voice was calm. "My grandmother said one day you would remember." The sentence struck Elvis harder than any applause ever could. Grandmother. Only one woman in the world could have sent a child with those words. Only one. And she was supposed to be gone forever. Before Elvis could speak again, the crowd slowly began to part. Not because security demanded it, because something about the approaching figure compelled people to step aside. An elderly woman walked with the help of a weathered wooden cane. Every step seemed painful. Her silver hair danced in the evening breeze. Deep lines crossed her face like roads carved by grief. Yet her eyes remained steady. They never left Elvis. The moment she reached the front, she looked first at the boy. Her lips trembled. "My sweet Daniel." The child took her hand. Only then did she lift her gaze toward Elvis. 20 years disappeared in a single glance. Elvis forgot the crowd. He forgot the cameras. He forgot the concert waiting behind him. All he could see was the woman standing before him. The last living witness to a promise he had spent half his life trying to bury. Slowly, very slowly, she opened the small leather bag hanging from her shoulder. From inside, she removed an old envelope. Its edges had yellowed with age. The seal remained untouched. Across the front, written in faded blue ink, were 3 words that made Elvis's legs feel as though they no longer belonged to him. For Elvis alone. He recognized the handwriting before the envelope even reached his hands. A handwriting he had prayed never to see again, and never stopped hoping he would. His fingers shook as he reached toward it. The old woman did not let go immediately. Instead, she whispered words only Elvis could hear. "I promised him I would wait until you were ready." A tear escaped Elvis's eye. "I was never ready." The woman nodded sadly. "I know." She finally released the envelope. The entire street seemed to stop breathing. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. A warm wind carried the scent of summer through the silent crowd. Thousands of strangers stood only a few feet away, yet in that moment, Elvis had never felt more alone. Because he already knew one terrible truth. Whatever waited inside that envelope would not simply reopen an old memory. It would force him to choose between protecting the legend the world adored or finally telling the truth that had haunted his heart for 20 long years. The envelope felt impossibly light. Yet in Elvis's trembling hands, it weighed more than every gold record he had ever received. Around him, thousands of people waited in complete silence. The concert no longer mattered. The cameras no longer mattered. For the first time in years, the world had stopped asking Elvis Presley to perform. Instead, it was waiting for him to remember. His thumb rested against the brittle paper. He stared at the faded handwriting without opening it, because he already knew whose hand had written those words. Isaac. The name echoed inside his mind like a distant church bell. Charlie stepped closer. "Elvis?" No answer. The old woman spoke softly. "He told me you would hesitate." Elvis finally looked up. "You knew Isaac?" A gentle smile crossed the woman's face, though tears still glistened in her eyes. "I was his older sister." The words struck Elvis like a blow. For a long moment, he simply stared. 20 years. 20 years had passed, yet he had never known Isaac had a sister. Never known he had a family waiting for him. Never known. The thought refused to finish itself. The little boy quietly reached for his grandmother's hand. He watched Elvis with curious eyes, not with admiration, not with fear, almost as though he had heard stories about this man his entire life. The old woman nodded toward the envelope. "He wanted you to read it, only when your heart was ready to hear the truth." Elvis looked down again. His fingers slowly broke the brittle seal. The sound of old paper tearing echoed louder than the crowd itself. Inside lay a single folded page. Nothing more. No photographs, no explanations. Just one sheet of paper that had survived 2 decades. Elvis unfolded it carefully. The ink had faded, but every word remained clear. "My brother, if these words ever reach you, it means life found a way when we thought it never could. If you are reading this, do not blame yourself. You have already carried enough weight for both of us." Elvis stopped reading, his vision blurred. Charlie glanced toward the page, but respectfully looked away. The old woman lowered her head. She already knew every sentence by heart. Elvis took a slow breath and continued. "You once asked why I kept teaching you that strange dance. You thought it was only a game. It never was. Every movement carries a promise. One day, if we are separated, someone who loves me will find you by finishing that dance. Do not walk away from them. Do not let fear choose for you." For years, Elvis had convinced himself those memories belonged to another lifetime. Now every forgotten detail came rushing back. Memphis, 1954, a neighborhood where dreams were often larger than wallets. He and Isaac had spent endless evenings inside an abandoned church, escaping the noise of the outside world. Isaac loved music, not because he wanted fame, because he believed music healed wounds words could never touch. He had once told Elvis, "When people forget our names, kindness will still remember us." At the time, Elvis had laughed. Now those words broke something inside him. The letter continued. "If you are reading this beside a child, do not ask who he is. Ask yourself who he can become. Because every child deserves one person who keeps a promise, even if the promise is 20 years late." Elvis lowered the page. His hands shook violently. The little boy looked at him. "Mr. Presley?" His voice was almost too quiet to hear. "Were you really my great-uncle Isaac's friend?" Elvis closed his eyes. Friend. The word felt painfully small. "He was my brother." The boy smiled. "My grandma said you'd say that." The old woman nodded. "Because that's how he always described you." A tear rolled down Elvis's cheek. "I failed him." "No," she answered immediately. "You believed he was gone forever." "I still failed. You survived." "There is a difference." "There is." The old woman stepped closer. "But surviving is not the same as abandoning someone." For several moments, neither spoke. The evening breeze carried the distant sound of traffic through the silent street. Finally, Elvis looked toward Daniel. "You learned the dance perfectly." Daniel smiled shyly. "Grandma made me practice every Sunday." "Every Sunday?" The old woman laughed softly through her tears. "He complained every single week." "I did," Daniel admitted. "I wanted to play baseball." The crowd chuckled gently. For the first time all evening, the tension eased. "But Grandma always said the dance would help someone remember." She looked toward Elvis. "It did. Elvis folded the letter carefully. What happened after Isaac disappeared? The smile vanished from the old woman's face. Her eyes drifted toward the setting sun. He never disappeared. Elvis frowned. What do you mean? He came home. The words stole the air from Elvis's lungs. He came home, badly injured. No one moved. He survived only a few weeks. Elvis felt the world tilt beneath him. I searched everywhere. I know. He never answered. I know. I wrote letters. I know. I waited. I know. So why? The old woman gently placed her hand over his. Because he made me promise. Elvis stared at her. He knew you were becoming famous. He said the world had opened a door for you. He was proud. So proud that he refused to let his suffering become the chain that held you back. He believed if you came home, then you would never leave again. Silence. He wanted you to keep singing. Elvis's eyes filled once more. He made you hide the truth. He made me protect your dream. Elvis shook his head. I would have come. I know. I would have stayed. I know. I would have chosen him. I know. Her voice broke. And that's exactly why he didn't tell you. A single sob escaped Elvis before he could stop it. Years of buried guilt surfaced all at once. Every standing ovation, every sold-out concert, every smiling photograph. They suddenly felt painfully incomplete. Charlie rested a hand on his shoulder. You couldn't have known. Elvis answered without lifting his head. No. But I can choose what happens next. The old woman studied him carefully. Can you? What do you mean? You've protected this pain for 20 years. She looked toward the thousands of faces watching in silence. If you tell them everything, they'll know I wasn't there. They'll know the man they admire carried a secret. They'll know legends cry. Elvis slowly turned toward the crowd. Thousands of strangers looked back. No cheering, no shouting, only waiting. For years they had come to hear his voice. Tonight, they were waiting to hear his heart. Elvis looked once more at Daniel. The little boy smiled exactly the way Isaac used to. In that instant, Elvis understood something he should have understood decades earlier. This night was never about protecting his reputation. It was about keeping the promise hidden inside a forgotten dance. He carefully folded the letter and slipped it into the inside pocket of his white jacket. Then he reached for the microphone a stagehand quietly offered him. The weight of the metal felt strangely familiar. He looked toward the stage, toward the bright lights, toward the audience that had loved him for years. Then he looked back at Daniel. I've spent half my life singing songs people wanted to hear. He swallowed hard. But tonight, his voice almost disappeared. I need to tell a story I've been too afraid to remember. The crowd remained perfectly still. Not a single person raised a camera. Not a single person spoke. Because everyone sensed the same thing. The greatest performance of Elvis Presley's life was about to begin. And for the first time, there would be no music played. For the first time in anyone's memory, the stage belonged not to a song, but to the truth. The thousands gathered along the boulevard watched as Elvis slowly climbed the steps leading to the outdoor stage. The brilliant white spotlights illuminated his famous suit, yet somehow he looked smaller than before. Not weaker, simply human. The master of ceremonies whispered nervously into his headset. "Should we delay the show?" No one answered. Even the television producers lowered their hands. Every instinct they possessed told them the same thing. If they interrupted this moment, they would interrupt history. Elvis reached the microphone. Usually the crowd erupted the instant he appeared beneath the lights. Tonight, not a single voice rose. The silence was almost sacred. He looked across the sea of faces. Young couples, children sitting on their parents' shoulders, veterans wearing old service caps, elderly women clutching records that had followed them through decades. Thousands of strangers, thousands of different lives. Yet every pair of eyes carried the same question. Who was the little boy? Elvis closed his eyes for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried none of the confidence people expected, only honesty. People spend their whole lives believing they know someone. He paused. They know the songs, the photographs, the smiles, the headlines. A faint smile appeared. But those things are only the light. His expression slowly changed. Every light casts a shadow. The evening breeze swept gently across the stage. I've spent years trying to outrun one memory. He reached into his jacket. The old letter appeared once more. Its paper trembled in his hands. This letter has waited 20 years. He looked toward Daniel and the elderly woman standing quietly below the stage. So have they. A young reporter lowered his notebook. He no longer cared about tomorrow's headline. He simply listened. I once had a friend. Elvis smiled through tears. No, he shook his head. A brother. He believed kindness could outlive fame. He believed promises mattered more than applause. The crowd remained utterly still. I searched for him. I never found him. I thought he had forgotten me. His voice cracked. The truth, he looked at the letter, was that he loved me enough to let me keep chasing my dream. Many people quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Charlie stood near the wings of the stage, struggling to keep his composure. He had stood beside Elvis for years, yet he had never heard this story. Elvis looked back toward Daniel. This little boy didn't come here asking for money. He didn't ask for my autograph. He didn't ask me to sing. He came carrying a promise. Daniel smiled shyly. His grandmother gently squeezed his shoulder. Elvis stepped down from the stage. Every television camera followed him. He walked across the pavement until he stood directly in front of Daniel once more. Then, to the complete astonishment of everyone watching, Elvis slowly knelt. Thousands gasped, not because a superstar had bent his knee, because they understood exactly what it meant. A legend was choosing humility. Elvis looked into Daniel's eyes. I wasn't there for your great-uncle. I cannot change that. His voice trembled. But if you'll let me, he swallowed hard, I'll spend the rest of my life keeping the promise I should have kept long ago. Daniel frowned slightly. What promise? Elvis smiled. The promise that no child carrying Isaac's heart would ever have to walk alone. The little boy stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something no one expected. He wrapped both arms around Elvis's neck. The embrace lasted only a few seconds, yet it felt as though 20 years of sorrow dissolved within it. Many people in the crowd openly cried. Even hardened police officers quietly removed their hats. The old woman covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. "I knew," she whispered. "I knew he would remember." Elvis slowly stood. He turned toward the audience one final time. "I've received awards. I've sold records. I've stood beneath brighter lights than these." He smiled gently. "But none of those moments will ever mean more than this one." He placed one hand over his heart. "If tonight teaches us anything, it is this. Do not wait 20 years to tell someone they mattered. Do not believe success can replace love. And never assume a promise disappears simply because time passes." The crowd answered not with screams, but with applause unlike anything Los Angeles had ever heard. It began softly. One pair of hands, then another, until the entire boulevard echoed with a single wave of gratitude. Not for a performance, for a confession. The applause continued for several long minutes. No band played, no orchestra entered, no fireworks exploded. None were needed. As the sound slowly faded, Elvis turned toward Daniel. "What do you say?" Daniel tilted his head. "About what?" Elvis smiled. "You've shown me the dance. Now," he offered his hand, "would you show me the rest of it?" Daniel laughed. "I thought you already knew it." "I only remembered half." "Then we'll learn the rest together." The boy took his hand. Right there, in the middle of the street, with thousands watching, the old dance began again. This time there was no grief hidden inside it, only hope. The movements were slow, simple, almost ordinary. Yet every step carried a story no newspaper could fully describe. Every turn honored a man whose kindness had quietly shaped lives long after his own had ended. When the final movement came, Daniel placed his hand over his heart. Elvis mirrored him. Then, together, they reached toward the evening sky. The same gesture, the same promise, but a different ending. Far above them, the last light of sunset disappeared beyond the horizon. The first stars quietly appeared. The old woman looked upward and smiled through tears. "He's watching," she whispered. Whether anyone believed those words did not matter, because everyone present believed something else. Some people become famous because the world remembers their voice. Others become unforgettable because, at the most important moment of their lives, they choose compassion over pride. Years later, people would struggle to remember what songs had been scheduled for that concert. Many could not recall what Elvis had been wearing. Some even forgot the exact date. But every witness remembered the image of a legendary performer kneeling before a little boy in the middle of a Los Angeles street, choosing truth over applause. And whenever they told the story to their children, they always ended it the same way. Sometimes a song can fill a stadium, but only love can echo through generations.